Fox's preference. It's probably a position that the John Elway and the new administration there is going to preference. So, watching Darius play in the 3-4, he was dominant. When he played in the 4-3, he was dominant. People like to talk about Nick Fairley and all the disruptions that he caused. Though he got the statistics, Marcell Dareus was just as effective, if not more effective. So I think the Broncos are going to look that way at number 2.
Well, I like that pick. If I were running the Broncos, that's probably the direction I would go. Although, just to play devil's advocate, I would say that I think the Broncos could probably get a good defensive tackle at the top of round 2. They have the 36th overall pick. So if they could get a Marvin Austin or Stephen Paea there, I think they could get a good defensive tackle. I don't think they could get necessarily a good linebacker, certainly not nearly as good as a Von Miller. So I think you could make that argument, but I think the Broncos need to build the trenches, and I wouldn't have any problem with them using 2 of their first 3 picks on defensive linemen. I think they have some talent in the secondary. They definitely need a linebacker, but I like the Darius pick, and if I run the Broncos, that's the way I'd go. Stuber, what say you?
With all due respect, all right, now this is where I'm going to get in trouble if I'm ever a general manager, because I go after impact guys, and I'm not saying that Marcell Dareus is not going to be an impact guy, but I look at Von Miller. This kid is an absolute freak, and from day one, he to me is the odds-on favorite to be the defensive rookie of the year. All right, I tweeted this earlier. 9 times since 2000, a linebacker has been defensive rookie of the year. The kid had 17 sacks 2 seasons ago. I believe he had 10 sacks this past year. All right, now John Elway. If everyone's comparing Von Miller to Derek Thomas, John Elway got sacked by Derek Thomas 17 times. Not to mention, Derek Thomas's 100th sack came against John Elway as well. So if anyone knows the impact that a guy like Von Miller can have on the defense, it's John Elway. And if everyone's comparing him to Derek Thomas, why not John Elway take a kid like that, put him on a defense that is absolutely horrendous, that could use an impact guy off the edge? I know Elvis Dumerville is a very good pass rusher, but who knows how healthy he's going to be coming up that pectoral tear. I mean, honestly, I would just go for the impact guy right away. I know Darius is a nice player, but I think Von Miller is head and shoulders, to me, the number 1 prospect in this draft. Maybe Patrick Peterson's number 1A. But Von Miller's right up there with anyone in this year's class.
Brandon, what do you think about the Broncos?
Well, again, as a Broncos fan, this is actually my pick. I'm a little bit of the old school. You build a defense from the outside in, and from the inside out, and we currently have 0 inside. Darius is a freak for his size. He can play every position on that line, from the 0 technique to the 5 technique, really. We want him right up the middle, obviously, and he's just a load. We really do need lots and lots of help there. The Broncos released 2 of their starting defensive tackles at the start of the offseason, and I would not be shocked if they pull the trigger here and then take a defensive tackle with one of their 2 picks in the second round and come out with 2 defensive tackles in the first 2 rounds.
Hey, Scott, can I butt in really quick?
Yeah.
Is Marcell Dareus an Ndamukong Suh type of prospect?
I think he's a notch below. I mean, nobody's really Ndamukong Suh. He was a rare special prospect, but yeah, I think he can be just a notch below. I mean, I have Darius as the 3rd best player in this whole draft, and I've talked about before. The thing I like about him so much is that he was able to take over games from that defensive end spot in the 3-4 scheme, and that's just rare. You don't see those guys make an impact like that. So I just wonder what's going to happen when he gets put inside of that 3 technique and they let him loose. I think he's going to blossom, and people are going to be surprised at how much of a playmaker he can be, even though he didn't necessarily put up the eye-popping splash plays like a guy like Nick Fairley did.
Well, my thing with that is if he's not an Ndamukong Suh type of prospect or, close to that, I'm not taking him with the number 2 overall pick. I'm not taking a defensive tackle that high, especially as you said. You get Marvin Austin and Stephen Paea. You can get some nice defensive tackles at the top of the second round. I would take the impact guy right away.
Well, and the Broncos have also been let it be known that they are more than open to trading down.
Sure. Yep.
And I've heard they really like Nick Fairley. Maybe they feel they can move down 6-10 spots and still get Nick Fairley later. Now, it's always easier said than done. All these teams seem like want to trade down. but I just don't know if they're going to get the offers. And even if they did get an offer, I think it's probably going to be 50 or 75 cents on the dollar. I don't see a deal happening. Chris, do you see any chance the Broncos get an offer that entices them to move down from 2?
I really don't, although there are rumors going on right now that the Washington Redskins are very high on Blaine Gabbert, and, you know, there's a little bit of worry that the Buffalo Bills may take Gabbert at number 3. I don't really see that happening, but if the Redskins really like Gabbert, maybe the Broncos are of interest to the Redskins and maybe move up, although the Redskins don't have that much ammunition. You know, they don't have a lot of draft picks in this year's draft, so, you know, Daniel Snyder's done some crazy things in the past, so if he wants to go up to number 2 to get Gabbert, I would not rule that out, but again, I think the Broncos probably are stuck at number 2.
Well, and I don't think that's such a bad position to be in. For a team that needs so much help on defense, they're going to be sitting there and facing potential impact players at all 3 levels. So I think that's a pretty envious position to be in for a team that needs help on defense so badly. So let's move on to the third pick, the Buffalo Bills, and this will be Brandon Nall. So, Brandon, what do you got for Buffalo?
You know what? I'm not going to surprise anyone. I'm not going to rock the boat too much here. Von Miller has to be the pick if Cam Newton's gone. You know, I think Cam Newton is the type of player that Mr. Daly up there would be looking for. I mean, if Daly did what he did with some of the people in his past, you know, Big Ten and that sort of thing, I can't imagine what that guy would do with an athlete like Cam Newton. But since Cam is gone, Von Miller is the pick. You know, you just can't argue with the production. Possibly the strongest pass rusher in the draft. Definitely the most accomplished linebacker in the draft. You know, if you look at the last 2 years, we have 28 sacks over the last 2 seasons, which is just a phenomenal number. Butkus Award winner in 2010, and you know he just stinks of success. And you know there was some pause earlier in the year whenever his name got mentioned along with one Vernon Golston. But you know, really watching the tape, I don't know how you can go wrong with this guy. He's cerebral. He's an amazing athlete. You know, he knows how to get to the quarterback, and I think that he probably is one of the very best athletes in the draft.
Well, and I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I think I was probably the first one to have Miller going to the Bills even before the Senior Bowl, and to me it just makes a lot of sense. And I know some people say, well, they acquired Sean Merriman and signed him. Well, Sean Merriman isn't the Sean Merriman we were accustomed to seeing 3-4 years ago. He's been a shell of his former self, can't stay healthy. They're taking a chance on him, but he's far from sure thing. And Chris Kelsay, he's averaged 3 sacks a year during his career. Not exactly the type of impact edge rusher that you want in that 3-4 scheme. And one of the worst pass rushes in the league last year, and I think the Bills would jump at the opportunity to bring in a guy like Von Miller. Now, if Cam Newton is there, maybe he tempts them, but I just think Von Miller makes so much sense. They coached the kid at the Senior Bowl. They got up close and personal look at him for an entire week. I just think it all fits there. Shane, what do you think?
Yeah, and I think watching him at the Senior Bowl, though he played that 3-4 defense in college this past year, watching him make that transition to the 4-3 so fluidly tells me who he is as a player. I mean, that tells me about his intelligence. That tells me about his ability to digest the playbook, to go in and just be a football player based on instincts. And that's really what I want to see from my players. No matter what system I run, no matter what it is, I just want to see someone that's going to go out there and play some football. And that's what Von Miller does so well. So that's why I think this is a great pick. I would be surprised if he falls past 3, let alone 5. I think he's a top 5 pick, best pass rusher in this draft, bar none. As Brandon kind of mentioned, if Cam Newton's off the board, I think this is a slam dunk pick for the Bills to pick Von Miller. And he would be such a great fit in that scheme. I think he would make such a tremendous difference for this defense, and they can look to continue building that D later in this draft.
Stuber, Miller to the Bills, you like it?
I hope the Buffalo Bills are happy right now because on draft day, he won't be in Buffalo, my guys. He won't be in Buffalo. I think, honestly, if you look at this realistically, I think it's a great fit for the Bills, honestly. If they can get this guy at number 3, it's a steal. It's a flat-out steal. Because if you look in the beginning of the second round at the outside linebackers that are possibly going to be available, you got Bruce Carter, and then who else? Justin Houston, and some other guys named Joe. Honestly, I would go Von Miller number 2. I think Marcell Dareus actually fits best in Buffalo. I like him better as a 3-4 defensive end. I think he comes off the edge. He's powerful. He's strong. I think, you know what, I would reverse the picks, but you can't go wrong with either way. But I think he ends up in Denver, and I think Dareus ends up in Buffalo. That's my opinion.
Well, I agree with you. And if Miller does come off the board at number 2 of the Broncos, I think Dareus would be a great fit in Buffalo as well.
Absolutely. It's a perfect fit. But again, I'm not making these selections. No one's making these selections other than the teams. But I think that's how it's going to pan out. I do think it's going to go Miller 2, then Dareus 3.
What do you guys think, though, of the value if they were to take Dareus of using a top 3 overall pick on a 5 technique? And I think Dareus is a much better player than Tyson Jackson was, but I think you can make the argument, well, you can get 5 techniques later. You don't necessarily need to use such a premium draft pick on it. Would anybody have a problem using such an early pick on that position, Shane?
No, I'm fine with it. I think nowadays with the NFL, it's about getting an impact player more so than position. And you mentioned Tyson Jackson. The Chiefs kind of threw it out the window with that. I mean, barring like kicker or punter, I really think position shouldn't play too much of a part in it, though we know it does. But I think Dareus is just, once again, as Chris kind of mentioned, such a great fit for them. And how dominant. You don't usually get a 5 technique that's played the 5 technique before, and Dareus has done that. He's played that before. We've seen the tape of him do that and be dominant, so that's why he's worth that number 3 pick, because we can see it.
All right, Shane, you really hit the nail on the head there when you said impact player. I just can't imagine them taking Dareus with Cam Newton on the board. I mean, I honestly think it's got to be, Miller or Cam Newton, because impact is the word, and that town definitely needs an impact.
Oh, I'm sorry. So this is my pick for number 4, Cincinnati Bengals, and I'm going to go with A.J. Green, the wide receiver from Georgia. That's what I'm hearing, and that, I'm even hearing that if A.J. Green is gone, they're going to option to Julio Jones. So the Bengals seem intent on going with a wide receiver, and then they're going to try to get a quarterback later on. Obviously, the big question is what's going to happen with Carson Palmer, and personally, if I were running the Bengals, I'd be looking long and hard at Blaine Gabbert, because I don't think Carson Palmer is going to blink. But it sounds like A.J. Green, and it's hard to argue with that. I mean, especially if they think Carson Palmer is going to be back, you give him an impact weapon like A.J. Green to throw to, that's just going to give that offensive dimension that they've kind of been lacking. Ocho Cinco hasn't been the same player the last couple of years. Terrell Owens did pan out last year, and the early round picks that they've used on wideouts like Andre Caldwell, Jerome Simpson, Jordan Shipley, none of those guys, even in a best case scenario, really profile as number 1 wideout. So, hey, to get maybe the guy a lot of people consider to be the best player in the draft at number 4 overall, can't really argue with that too much, I don't think, but let's find out if anybody wants to argue about it. Stuber?
I can't really argue with the selection. I think A.J. Green is a very good wide receiver. When I watch film of him, I see, and this is going to sound scary, but I see shades of Charles Rogers. But A.J. Green's a much better route runner, obviously, but I like the pick. However, like you said, Scott, I think they really have to study and just talk about Blaine Gabbert in that war room. I really do. Just because they add A.J. Green doesn't mean Carson Palmer is coming to Cincinnati ever again. They really have to make sure to get a quarterback somewhere. And if they can do it at the beginning of the 2nd round, or if they trade back into the end of the 1st round and target a guy like maybe a Christian Ponder or Colin Kaepernick or even Andy Dalton, if he falls that far in the 1st round, they have to get a quarterback. So, but A.J. Green's a great fit. I think he is a guy who can be an impact player. But again, you never know with the Cincinnati Bengals. You never know how a prospect's going to pan out over there. Hopefully A.J. Green doesn't fade into obscurity, but he has the talent to be a very big-time player.
Shane?
He's my top player in this draft. I think it'd be a slam dunk pick for the Bengals. I think it'd be great since T.O.'s out of town. Ocho Cinco, who knows? I think it's a tremendous pick. I think A.J. Green has a low bust rate. We haven't seen him with some of the injuries that Charles Rogers suffered. As Chris mentioned, Charles Rogers would suffer in the NFL. So hopefully A.J. Green doesn't go that route, because I think that's what derailed his career. just such a smooth athlete, such a polished guy, and that's where I think AJ Green's going to be successful. Is that